the last 5 years, I've really gained new confidence in myself and a new love in myself and self-worth of knowing actually I'm not defined by being in a wheelchair. And even though I can't walk, my purpose isn't paused. And I just have so much, there's so much people can give who live with a chronic illness or disability. And that I think that's so important to remember that we're a whole human being. Like I've been broken in every single way, but I truly feel that God's made me whole for where I am, and it's ever evolving and changing. But it's definitely been a real process, but I'm really grateful to be where I am today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Christianity Integrated podcast, a channel which helps you to integrate Christian wisdom into your everyday life. And today we're joined by Francesca, a faith and encouragement speaker, writer, and a disability advocate. Hi, Francesca, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, it's great to have you here. And I guess just to start off, I wanted to take it back to your childhood. Have you always been a Christian, or were you engaged in sports, or what did you like to do?
Yes, so I've always been a Christian. I was brought up in a Christian home. I was christened as a baby, went to Sunday school, went to church, and I would say I knew Jesus from a very young age. And I have the gift of seeing in visions. And I remember like as young as 3 years old, praying with my mum, and I just remember seeing Jesus kneeling beside her. And so it was just such a beautiful vision of him, and I felt like I had a really deep relationship with him for a very young age. And I grew up going to church a little bit throughout my childhood, but it wasn't particularly regular in that sense. But I also went to a senior school that was Church of England, and that was a huge part of my life. And so I would say that my relationship with God was a very vital part of my childhood. And what I used to love to do, I loved school, I loved learning, I loved every aspect of life really. And all the extracurricular activities, I danced 3 times a week, I played my flute, the orchestra choir, sports, like you name it, I did it. And if I couldn't do it, I would be determined to work at it until I achieved something. So yeah, it was a very full life as a child.
That sounds great. And the reason why I wanted to speak to you is because you, in particular, have a really interesting story. So, do you mind explaining what happened to you from 13?
Yeah. So a few months before I turned 13, I was at school and I just had a small accident. I tripped up the stairs, which is very me. I do everything backwards. So it fell off rather than down, and I tore the ligaments in my left ankle. And it was as if on that moment of impact, something shifted in my body, and I've never felt the same way again. From that day forward, my life just landslided and my health rapidly deteriorated, and was just really it was just a really difficult experience, but everything happened quite fast throughout that year. I also had a virus that summer, and then by the September of 2007, my body was just gone and my life was never the same again.
I'm really sorry to hear that. It's obviously a very difficult experience. And if you don't mind explaining a bit further, what have been some of the challenges that you've been through, both mentally and also physically?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a very hard journey. And so I'm 31 now, so it's been a long time since that journey started back in 2007. But for me, it was, I'd say, it's all aspects of my life changed. So I became very withdrawn. I had to stop going to school at the age of 13 because I was so unwell. I was so incredibly fatigued and encompassed by pain. I wasn't able to eat any solid foods, and so I lost a lot of weight. I lost immense amounts of my hair as well, and so the whole of my body was just no longer the person that I used to be. I had to stop doing everything that I knew and loved. I really couldn't get up off the couch due to overwhelming fatigue and pain, and I experienced seizures as well. I have quite a lot of tremors, so I find it hard to speak, and I needed 24/7 care from my parents and my grandparents. And at the age of 13, I became a full time wheelchair user. And so it was a very difficult experience for me. And I think at the time I didn't realize, but I was grieving the life that I'd lost before I became unwell. And so it didn't only impact me physically, but also mentally and emotionally as well. And so I guess I wanted to preface this with a trigger warning because with mental health, sometimes it can be a bit triggering, but I experienced deep depression and anxiety, OCD, self harm, and also suicidal thoughts. It was a really dark place for me. And I just really wasn't, I was just like a shadow of my former self. And so it was a real journey to be able to get through that and to I had a lot of support from my family and my parents and grandparents, which was amazing. Like I really wouldn't be here today without them. And to begin with, I've got a whole list of diagnoses now, probably like a whole A4 sheet full of them. But at the time, at the beginning, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, and having those two diagnoses, if anybody's been diagnosed with those, it doesn't really give you very much hope. There isn't very much help with regards to that. And I was going from different hospital to specialists to be able to try and get help. And it just felt like never ending. There wasn't much hope really in that. And just a never ending time with hospitals and specialists. And it was really just a battle to survive really throughout the early times. And now I have, I'd say, the last few years had more different diagnoses that have really helped me understand what's actually going on in my body. And so that's been really helpful. But from the beginning, it was really just the whole of my life turned upside down.
Spoke a bit earlier about your faith and how you're always active in it. Would you say that changed in any way after having some of these diagnoses, or what was that like?
I would say it went from believing in Jesus to desperately needing him. I felt very frightened and I didn't really know whether I was going to live for very much longer. And I just remember just lying in the darkness in bed and just holding onto a wooden cross that I'd been bought and just begging God to either heal me or to take me home because I just couldn't do it any longer. And so I definitely say my faith really shifted in that regard. And I questioned a lot of the time. I was like, God, why has this happened? And I also, as a 12-year-old, I remember lying in bed at night, going through everything that I could think of and ask for forgiveness if I'd done something wrong. And I feel like that's quite heavy to carry at such a young age. And so it was a journey with God throughout that. And I'd say I just needed him. And I knew that was the only hope I had left when everything else had been stripped away, just needing God. And there was a lot of times throughout, especially my younger years, where I was completely bedbound and unable to do anything or to see, to speak, to really move. And so I just knew that God was really fighting for me throughout that time.
Yeah, it sounds like a really tough experience and difficult to go through. And I think it was at the end of 2020, I may be wrong, that something else happened. Do you mind elaborating on that a bit further too?
Cool. So, as I say, I feel like I've used the word journey a lot throughout this podcast
Mm.
already, but in 2020, I would say I was the strongest I'd ever been because there was times throughout my life where, as I said before, I was bedbound and I had to really rehabilitate from scratch. So I had to learn to sit up myself, be able to feed myself, to be able to speak, to be able to read, to be able to stand and to be able to walk again. And so that was a very long journey to be able to get to that place. And in 2020, I'd worked all of those years to get to the place that I was where I was able to get food for myself, being able to walk unaided. On my bad days, I'd still need help with things and use mobility aids, but I was just really in a really healthy place, I would say, until Christmas Day of 2020, which ironically being Christmas Day, this happened. But I remember having a migraine, which wasn't anything out of the ordinary for me because I'd experienced those a lot of times before. And I went to bed and everything just went dark. I just remember holding my body shaking. And in that moment, I had something similar to a stroke. And I lost the ability to use the whole of the left hand side of my body. And one of the conditions in my body that I didn't realize I had, which was undiagnosed at the time, suddenly spread as well. So within that instant, I lost the use of the left hand side of my body, and that was partially paralyzed. And I remember trying to get up and I didn't realize it had happened and I just collapsed on the floor. And in that moment, I also lost the ability to walk instantaneously again. So that was really frustrating. And I wouldn't necessarily, I was afraid. I just felt very confused at the time. But then I realized that things had drastically changed. And so I knew that I needed God in that moment. And I felt a little bit discouraged, but that quickly turned into, okay, God, what can you teach me through this and how can you transform my life throughout this next chapter. I definitely would say the last 5 years, I've really gained a great purpose in my life that I didn't have before. I really felt because I wasn't well enough to go to university and I felt really unequipped for life, really. But I think God has really met me in those times. In the last 5 years, especially, I've been able to be a part of different ministries, non-profit organizations, and Christian companies, being able to connect with people who are going through similar circumstances to myself. And God's really given me a hope throughout that and a confidence and a strength to be able to help other people in the same situation. And especially the last couple of years, being able to talk to people all the way around the world. And it's really hard when you're in these situations as a patient within these medical situations, and you feel like you're just another number. Your voice isn't heard. You really get gaslit sometimes and not listened to. And it was a real juxtaposition of, okay, God's actually given me experience to be able to help others through this. And that has just been really amazing. And if someone had told me at 13 where I'd be today, I feel a little sad with my physical circumstances, but just to see what God has transformed my life into, it's just been amazing. Had just such a great empathy for others as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's definitely shone through whilst I've been talking to you and in previous videos as well. So it's definitely very clear. And I guess talking about one of the organizations that you worked with, I think you did some work with Salt, if I'm right.
I did, yeah.
Do you mind, yeah, talking a bit more about what you did there?
Of course, so the last couple of years, I've been doing something called an audio room, which is part of the app that you can join online via the website as well. And a friend of mine, we spoke about chronic illness and faith, and it was just really amazing to see all of these people who have felt really isolated in their homes living with chronic illness, or people who just want to learn more about supporting those living with chronic illness and disability, and being able to create a community, like a safe space. It was always just such a place where there was no judgment, being able to just bring anything that you needed to the space. And I would just sit on my bed with my laptop and talk to people all over the world. So, say, like in America, Australia, New Zealand. I think sometimes we had someone from like Lanzarote, all these different places, which is so cool. And just getting to listen to their experiences, because some of them may not have anybody to talk to. And that was a real learning experience for me. And also, like I said before, I feel like God gave me authority to speak there and be able to hold that space, but also come from a real vulnerable space of knowing what that feels like and being able to just encourage and support those who really needed it. And because it was on a dating app as well, we did talk about dating and how difficult that can be living with a chronic illness too.
Yeah. Cool. And I guess, do you want to elaborate more on that in terms of how you found it, if you don't mind saying personally, or how other people have found living with chronic illness and dating as well?
Yeah, for sure. It's very difficult. I think dating is hard enough anyway, let alone throwing chronic illness and disability into the mix as well. And I think something that we've learned throughout the audio rooms is how visible some disabilities are and some aren't, and whether if you're on a online dating, you can put whether you use your mobility aids. Like for me, I'm a full-time worker user now, and so I have that on my profile. But for others, that might not be the case. And so I think the biggest thing that we found difficult, and for myself, that came up repeatedly, is how do we explain what we go through to new people? Because ultimately, you're meeting a stranger online,
Mm.
and how do you explain that? So, like for myself, today I'm having a conversation with you. I'm dressed, makeup, just functioning. Whereas there's other times where I'm completely in bed asleep most of the day. I can't speak. I need a lot of help from my family. And so that's been the hardest thing for me. And I also feel a bit of embarrassment with that. And I'm like, how do I explain this to somebody? And so I think God's really given me more of a confidence to understand who I am as a person and know that I do have good qualities too, but also obviously I do come with a lot of challenges as well in my life. And so that's something that I have really wrestled with. And there's been seasons where I felt better to be able to go on some dates or have a short term relationship. And then other times God said to me, no, you need to stay single and just enjoy that single time and be able to gain strength and be able to enjoy time with God as well. And so it's definitely been a learning experience. And obviously, I'm not an expert because I'm still single. And hopefully, God willing, one day I'll be able to meet a husband. But yeah, that's definitely been my experience.
And I guess some of those feelings, identity, self-worth,
I'd say at the very beginning, I really struggled because as a child, I was really confident. I wouldn't say I was necessarily really outgoing. I would say I was quietly confident and was able to really make friends easily and just loved creating new friendships wherever I went. And so it was really difficult for me going from being a very healthy, energetic, love the life person to just being a shell of a human being. And the way that my body changed, my like physical appearance, mentally I changed, my personality changed. And so that was very difficult for me to understand. I didn't really know how to live in that new body. And so that all of my self worth went, all my self confidence completely diminished. And it was a real journey of being able to gain that back. I'd say observing my sister, there wasn't necessarily anything she did in particular towards me that helped, but just seeing how she loved herself and seeing how that yeah, she went around the world in that, not in an arrogant way, but just in a real like nurturing way. And so that really helped me to understand and how I could implement that for myself, and also through therapy really helped. And I would say the last 5 years being a wheelchair user, that's completely changed my outlook on life as well. Because being a wheelchair user at the age of 13, I felt so shy. I didn't really want anybody to see me. And if you're out in a wheelchair, a lot of the time people look at you. Sometimes it could be sheer judgment, but a lot of times it's purely out of curiosity as to why someone so young may be in a wheelchair. But I found that really difficult to deal with. But the last 5 years, I've really gained new confidence in myself and a new love in myself and self worth of knowing actually I'm not defined by being in a wheelchair, and even though I can't walk, my purpose isn't paused. And I just have so much. There's so much people can give who live with a chronic illness or disability, and that I think that's so important to remember that we're a whole human being. Like I've been broken in every single way, but I truly feel that God's made me whole for where I am, and it's ever evolving and changing. But it's definitely been a real process. But I'm really grateful to be where I am today.
incredible. I really like the way that you have such a positive outlook on life no matter what happens. And into that a bit further, I really wanted to talk a bit more about comparison because you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but how have you felt in that scenario? How have you felt constantly? Do you compare yourself to other people or do you really stay focused on your own self? What do you do? How does that work for you?
It's definitely a mix, I would say, and I think everybody can relate to this, whatever stage of life that you're in. And for myself, I'd say I have not only compared myself to others, but also compared myself to the expectations I had for my own life, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so
Okay.
think, yeah, I think also in a time that has social media, it's so easy to just see what other people are up to. And I felt really alone when I was younger, when I couldn't join in, and I've missed out a lot in life. And it took me a long time to get to a place of acceptance for where God has me. And a scripture that I really love that really helps me is in Hebrews 12, and it says, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." And this is always the scripture that helps me, like a reminder to stay in my own lane and not to left or right, but to keep my eyes fixed on Jesus. But also, if I do look left or right, to be able to encourage others along that way and turn that comparison into encouragement and celebration for others. And that has really helped me. So, for instance, say a friend gets engaged, to hype them up and to celebrate them in that, because even though you're not where you thought you might be in life, your turn might come soon, and then that friend will be able to support you when they comes. And so it's not always easy, and it can fluctuate between feeling like confident in where God has me versus I still sometimes can slip into that comparison trap very easily. But I think another thing to remember, especially times with social media, is you never know what's going on in somebody's life. They could just be putting on, a good face for social media, and you never know what goes on behind closed doors, what they're struggling with. So I try not to judge people and to be able to, yeah, just encourage them as well within that. But it's definitely not easy.
No, I can definitely agree with that. The comparison thing. And as you said, not looking at what everyone's doing online because it's not the whole story for sure. And I think from your previous podcast that you did maybe a few years ago, so I just wanted to ask whether there's been anything that's changed since then, anything different.
Yes. So from that time, praise God, I have the use of my left arm back, which is amazing because for a long time I couldn't use it at all. With being partially paralyzed, like now I can move it. I'm not terribly great with gripping. I still drop things very much. So that's been a great improvement through different treatments and physio with that. But before Christmas, I received a new diagnosis for quite a few for my hips, which is a really hard to really process that, and I always felt like there was something more than I could explain. And it's definitely been hard this last section of the year to be able to understand what's next. And I'm just trusting God with that. But it's also validated why I've been struggling so much with not making progress with my standing and my walking. And so there's definitely been another curveball that's hit me. And I remember praying last year for so long about God revealing that. And I remember mum said to me before Christmas, you did pray for that, but we didn't expect all of this. And so it's sometimes if you get answered prayer, it's definitely more than you expect. But I feel in a better place now and just, yeah, just trusting God on each step of the way with that, whether it requires a major surgery or not, or we'll see as we go.
Yeah, that's definitely the right way to go about it, trusting God. And I think that, as I've mentioned earlier, that I really admire your attitude and how you've approached this. But I just wanted to ask on your behalf, what do you think is one thing, if you had to say, that you're really proud about yourself as you've been through this journey?
That's a really lovely question. And I think not many people take the time to reflect on that. And so I really appreciate this question. Um, I'd say the biggest thing is never giving up. Really, I really thought I didn't think I would make it to this age, honestly. There was times where I really thought I wouldn't be here anymore, but having that determination and persistence to carry on, but also with a really soft heart. I feel like God has really softened my heart for him, for myself, for other people, and to just to have that love and that appreciation for life as well is, I think, is a really important aspect that I've learned and that I'm really proud of, that I've not hardened myself to the circumstances which could have easily happened as well.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really cool. And then what's one thing that you think that you've learned that you know now that you don't think you would have known if you hadn't have been through this experience?
I definitely would say that life doesn't always go as planned. I think as a child, you look at your parents and you think, oh, they've got it all together. And they really haven't. People are
Mhm.
making it out as you go along. And if you'd have asked me where I'd be at as a child, where I thought I'd be at this age, I really thought I'd be married with two kids by now. And that
Mhm.
hasn't happened. And I don't know if that ever will. But it's just, yeah, understanding that life doesn't go as planned, but God has a really good plan for each of our lives, and to know that, and to understand that it's okay if things don't go how you thought they would.
Actually, I just wanted to ask a bit further about what you just said there, because that's something I've really struggled with, being content and okay with things that don't go as the way you planned or the way you wanted it to. So I just wanted to ask if you had any advice on how you are able to cope with that.
Wow, that's another great question. It's not easy. I think something that I found is allowing the hard feelings as well, because sometimes I think we can have the class as like good or bad emotion. And I
Mhm.
think our bodies and life circumstances, life is not easy. And I think as a Christian, something that I've always thought people from the outside think, oh, you're a Christian with God, nothing goes wrong. And that's not true. This life is very hard, but God makes things possible. And it's, I think, coming to a place of acceptance that things might not have looked the way that you thought they were, and asking God, okay, God, where do you see me going? What can I learn from this? What can you teach me through this experience? And but also not pushing those hard emotions away. As I said, when I got the new diagnosis, I was crying most days and really struggling to process that and to not get yourself down if you are feeling that way, to be able to just give yourself grace and receive that grace from God as well, to be able to, yeah, to understand that it's okay that you don't have everything together. You don't have to always put on a brave face. If you need help, reach out for help. And there's people that want to listen and support you and be able to guide you through that as well. It's don't struggle alone. It's a really big thing that I've learned, and it's taken me a long while to get to that place as well. I would always isolate and go inwards and think, oh, I don't want to burden anybody with how I'm feeling. Actually, it creates deeper connections and deeper bonds, and people want to be able to be there to help you as well.
And that's a brilliant answer, really good answer. And going back to something you said earlier, you talking about how you felt a little bit embarrassed about what happened to you. And kind of follow up from that, how would you say you react if, for example, something hasn't gone your way or something bad's happened to you, and then not pinning it on yourself, as you said, not thinking that it means that you've sinned incredibly, like, or done something wrong and it's not on you?
Yeah, again, I think because my journey has been so long, it has taken time. And so, as I said before, about creating that relationship with myself, that relationship from God. And I'd say it probably took me maybe a good, I'd say 5 years at the beginning to realize that it wasn't my fault. And I think God brought different people into my life to teach me that, and just not holding that grief inside for myself, but actually letting God's love in, I think was a big turning point. But it didn't happen overnight. It was a real struggle, I would say, if that answers that question.
No, yeah, that's a very honest answer for sure. And I guess just talking more about faith and the practicalities of it, how have you been able to still find community, even though it hasn't been as easy to be able to, for example, go to a church in person, or if it's like a difficult place to access?
Yes. So I've definitely had my fair share of not being able to access things. I would say the biggest turning point for me was the pandemic, because beforehand, I really felt very lonely, even though I had wonderful friends, wonderful family. The church that I went to, like the small group was up 3 flights of stairs, and I couldn't attend that, and I wasn't able to FaceTime in. And so I thought, oh, I really feel not included or seen here. And then when the pandemic happened, because everybody was in the same situation, everything went online. I joined a Bible study on Zoom at the time, and I feel really grateful that I've been able to maintain those friendships from the pandemic and be able to have like a hybrid way of doing things that were even when we came out of 2020, I'm still able to join, which is fantastic. And I also joined a global church online, which was in Nashville. It's a very God-given story, but they had an online community there. And so I have to be honest, it's not very easy to find online communities as much as it was during the pandemic. But if anybody wants to reach out to me and I can help point you in the right direction if you are struggling to find community or finding a place where you belong, I watched a lot of church services online and they have the chat box, which really helps feeling included. Or sometimes they may have an online prayer night or something like that. But I don't have an in person church at the minute, just from my energy levels of being able to go. But it's been really helpful to watch the church services online and be able to have different groups of friends that I know to turn to for prayer.
Yeah, that's incredible. And yeah, what you said about the church in Nashville, like it's something that would never be able to have that experience if it was in person. So it's a different kind of opportunity, which of course being online always helps. And I guess going into faith a bit more, how would you say the last 20 or nearly 20 years have been in terms of shaping your faith and formulating it?
That's a really great question. All of these are really great questions that I love, and it's so nice to reflect back on that. And my faith has always been something that's been very personal to me, and it's been my one hope when everything else was taken away. And like I said before, at the beginning, I felt quite frightened of God and not really understanding my life or how that had happened. But also knowing in the Bible, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. There's really hardships that happen. And I think when I understood that it wasn't my fault, then God was actually doing something with my life more than I could have imagined for myself. That's when my faith really shifted and it really became a strength. And each year that goes by, I'm amazed at how it gets even stronger. And just reflecting back on all the time that God has answered my prayers, like sometimes prayers are answered very fast, and then other times God is really working and shaping us before He can answer that prayer. And I think I really have a heart for gratitude and remembering where I've been to where I am now, and just a heart of praise for the Lord in that, and just feeling so grateful and not taking anything for granted, but also understanding that hard times are still going to come. And Jesus said, in this world, we will have trouble, but do not fear, I've overcome the world. And just knowing that there was a time when I was younger that if I passed away or if I was alive, Jesus was always with me. And I need that. And just having that as a hope and as a strength and a foundation for my life has been really amazing. And yeah, just continues to strengthen year by year.
So that's really good. And I guess continue to talk more about faith. Do you think there's a certain maybe Bible verse or story or character or anything which you really like to turn towards, especially in times of difficulty or struggle?
Yeah. My favorite scripture, and I have it on a necklace that a dear friend bought me for Christmas. It's Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. And that has got me through so much in my life. I just remember when I was profound and just be lying there and just God was like, just be still. I've got you. And I think so much of this world and life is so fast paced that God, where I had to be still and an intimacy with God and had a real deep relationship with Him, and just knowing that He's my Father and being able to, I can hear His voice and just have that really strong connection, even though, yeah, even though my life was so insular in that time, it really strengthened my relationship with God. And that is really, I feel like that's my life verse that I have with me always.
That's incredible. That's a great verse as well, for sure. I think it's so easy to get so distracted and having so many worries and doing all sorts of things, but just remembering that is like very helpful. I'll definitely be looking at that a bit further. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure your story will inspire so many others.